Welcome to Millennials Meet Liberty, your source for searing hot libertarian takes on the world's weekly headlines. Here's your host, Colt Thompson.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of Millennials Meet Liberty, episode number 20. Yes, that's right. We've hit a two-handle officially in the number of episodes that we've been producing here at the Double ML studio. So this morning I woke up and I looked at my phone as always because I'm a millennial and the first thing I'm going to do is check Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. And what do I see? I see your Commander-in-Chief, President Donald J. Trump, taking to Twitter and Facebook, and this is what he wrote. Can you believe that I will be impeached today by the radical left, do-nothing Democrats, and I did nothing wrong? A terrible thing. Read the transcripts. This should never happen to another president again. Say a prayer. Many of this was put in, uppercase font and with exclamation points per the style of Donald Trump. But I definitely got a kick out of reading that just because it was funny to me. And of course, here we are. And I think a lot of people could have predicted that we'd be in the situation we are right now as it pertains to impeachment of the president with the House of Representatives. So today I wanted to flesh out kind of the facts behind all of that and what we should expect going forward. Just how we got to this situation and just discuss some of the pertinent facts and situations, really surrounding all of this, because it's important to get this right and to really make light of it as libertarians, because the whole thing is a political circus and a shit show. So here we go. I'm going to bounce all over the place. I did my research. I've been following this relatively closely. So here we go. First and foremost, it should be kept in mind that the reason Donald Trump is being impeached today by the House of Representatives is because they claim that he violated the high crimes and misdemeanors clause in the Constitution. So what the high crimes and misdemeanors clause is it essentially says that an offense against the Constitution is an impeachable offense. Now, that is a very, very, very broad definition. If we were to hold every president, for that matter, to this standard, I think you could have impeached every single president. And there's legal scholars out there who have said that impeachment has not been used enough. This is actually the third time that a president is going to be going through the impeachment process in the United States. We all know about Big Dick Nixon and then subsequently Bill Clinton for all of his shenanigans, and now Donald Trump. But the difference between the two previous and Donald Trump is this has been a crusade since the onset of his election. The Democrats were so furious and enraged by his election in 2016 that immediately upon him entering the Oval Office, there was already calls for his impeachment. So they were already grasping at straws as soon as he took office. This should come as no surprise. Whereas in the previous two impeachment processes, none of that was really taking place. I mean, this is a totally different political climate we live in, where if you don't like the election results, you can turn around and try to basically bastardize or delegitimize the process they're in because the results are not where you wanted them to be. So going forward on this, what was really investigated was a telephone call to the Ukrainian president by that of Donald Trump. Now, let's keep in mind, Donald Trump was elected and his foreign policy is much different from that of the deep state and the establishment, the Bush, Obama, Clinton war party foreign policy. Donald Trump deviates from that often when he talks about getting out of endless wars, when he talks about a reckless spending on the military, for which he's a hypocrite because he's doubled down on those things, but he has not created a new war, and that's really an achievement in its own right. When you look at Barack Obama with Yemen and Syria, and you look at Bush with Afghanistan and Iraq, and you look at Clinton and his dealings in the Middle East as well, I mean, that pales in comparison to the immorality that Donald Trump has got himself into. Or I guess it really shows that Donald Trump has not caused as many issues in the Middle East per se and is trying to extend olive branches where he can. And not just the Middle East, but really in Asia as well and other parts of the globe. And this is just defecting from the establishment and deep state's policy here that we need to have adversaries and some other people you can deal with, but there's a few no-nos. Well, in this particular situation, Donald Trump making a phone call to Ukraine, this is not the first time where a confidential conversation was going to be made public by a whistleblower. So in this instance, Donald Trump came out and he talked about what happened in the call, and he actually released the call to the public because a whistleblower was basically blackmailing him or threatening him that this will be put out into the public. And of course, this person who is the whistleblower was very, very close to John Brennan, who is a politically charged Democrat who hates Donald Trump. And really just a holdover from the deep state, this whistleblower, someone who worked for the Obama administration. So what Trump is up against is oftentimes a lot of holdovers from the Democratic regime who just hate his guts and just happen to be there because not every office he can just alleviate people from their duties. So if you want to look more into this, you ask yourself, why did Hillary Clinton set up a server really that was separate of all of her normal dealings with foreign governments? And those 30,000 emails that was deleted by her. Well, the reason I backtrack to that is precisely because of what's happening to Donald Trump. I think Hillary Clinton was a lot more intelligent and understood the way of politics and the way things could be unearthed and how they could be considered treasonous or against the Constitution or, I guess in this case, an impeachable offense. So the reason she had that set up server was precisely because of her loose language with foreign officials, whereas Donald Trump is not quite sneaky, I guess, per se. So his mouth slips. Of course, we're going to be outed by whistleblowers. Just something I wanted to keep in mind. So thinking about everything else that's occurred with this whole proceeding with the investigation on impeachment, tactically, this doesn't look like very much sense for the Democrats. The Democrats have a lot on the line of the election in 2020 in a sense that they want to move and embolden themselves following a sweep of midterms where they were relatively successful. So you've noticed that there was maybe a handful of Democrats who decided not to participate in the impeachment folly, whereas all of the Republicans held the line. And the reason we know that's not partisan is there's a great number of Republicans who are not going to run for re-election despite them being odds-on favorites to hold that incumbency. They decided they're not going to do that. They dislike Donald Trump viscerally. But even them, they believe that this whole investigation is just a sham or a hoax, as Donald Trump calls it. So much like the Mueller investigation, which was just a fishing expedition in its own right, this Ukraine investigation and this impeachment proceedings is really just a bunch of nothingness. It's a nothing burger. So what you could see is heightened Republican turnout in the 2020 election due to all of this. So there's really just a lot to unpack here. And I know I'm going on and on and on, but it's important to keep in mind that a lot of this is just stupid. It really is just a giant, massive waste of taxpayer dollars, all because Donald Trump was interested in knowing why our massive amount of tax dollars were going to Ukraine, a country that had disdain for him, that also had a massive oil company there with Joe Biden's son on the payroll. So these are questions that are okay to ask when you're digging into a government in Ukraine that is very, very corrupt. So I want to kind of step back and think about all of this and what it means for the nation and why we're in the situation we're in. So it's very, very clear what happened here. There was no impeachable offenses as it pertains to what happened with Ukraine and the conversation with the president therein. So what we've seen since 2016 is basically a full-on war against Donald Trump from the Democrats to get him impeached or to fish or to dig for something that he did that was gravely wrong. It's just very bizarre, the world we're living in, when you don't like an election so much and you viscerally hate the president so much that you want to take him down and impeach him. I mean, what is the actual purpose here? We have less than 12 months before the election. The fact that the impeachment proceedings actually took place so quickly, too, is kind of shocking. I mean, this just goes to show how imperative it was for the deep state to take down Donald Trump. I mean, there was people subpoenaed who worked for Donald Trump who were given less than 2 days to provide thousands of pages of documentation and to show up. I mean, a lot of Trump's ambassadors and people traveling all over the world were summoned to report, to talk to Chairman Schiff and testify under 48 hours, and a lot of them couldn't show up. And then Schiff turns around and tells the public that this is obstruction of justice somehow. This is how childish and Shakespearean all of this has played out so far. So here we are today, and of course the House of Representatives will indeed vote to impeach Donald Trump. But of course, none of this means anything. As libertarians, we know this was just going to be tens of millions of dollars down the tubes. I think we stand at $40 million so far on this impeachment proceeding. I don't know how you spend $40 million on something like this. I mean, people just talking and collecting documents, like that's the government for you. I mean, maybe it's paying some of these high-priced attorneys, but what we're dealing with is people already on the government payroll in Congress. I mean, this whole thing doesn't make any sense, from the time suck and the spectacle and the money wasted. All of these things make really no sense at all. So all that's going to happen is the Senate is going to get this news from the House and they're going to vote not to impeach Donald Trump and nothing's going to go forward. And we're going to be like, well, this was just ridiculous. And I think the Trump campaign is furiously raising money as a result of all this. I mean, this is going to be a backfire shot for the Democrats. This whole thing is going to blow up in their face. If the economy can stay relatively green and everything can be good in terms of employment, I guess what the federal numbers are talking about here, if all of these things can be where they need to be and are favorable and line up well for Donald Trump, well, of course he's going to win probably in a landslide. He's probably going to win more than he did versus out of Hillary. While he lost the popular vote, he had a commanding presence over the Electoral College, and I think he's going to experience some of the same type of things, in large part because of this impeachment proceeding, which wasted time, money, and months of people's mental agony every time they clicked on Fox News or CNN and would see some really circus and nothing of any relevance. Because, again, this whole impeachment deal, none of these offenses were impeachable, even if they claim they are. They're just not, simply put. This is not assault against the Constitution. We elected the commander-in-chief to bridge the gap and serve as the main liaison between the other leaders of the countries and ourselves here in the homeland. That's what we did. And impeachment should be used a lot more often, don't get me wrong, because all Congress people and all members of branches of government swear to uphold the Constitution, and they do not. And you can actually impeach other people in Congress. It's not just Donald Trump. You could impeach Nancy Pelosi for going along with this whole charade, because Nancy Pelosi, at first, as a pretty lukewarm, moderate Democrat, said, we want nothing to do with this impeachment, or at least I don't personally. I think it's a huge distraction. We should focus our resources on actually achieving something, getting something done, and getting people elected into Democratic seats and really overthrowing this president. So she knows she's playing with fire here, and eventually the insurgents on the left really roped her in and told her this is something we need to do. So the whole thing is very, very eerie how the left can just drag people who are sort of centrist like Nancy Pelosi even further to the left to condemn someone who didn't do anything wrong. Donald Trump oftentimes puts his foot in his mouth on Twitter, like I mentioned this morning, or in the public, or to the media, or to foreign officials. But there was no subversion of what America wants here, or what the people want. There was no undermining of the taxpayers' funds here, undermining of the conscience of the voters. I mean, everything that Donald Trump did is in lockstep with how he behaved before the election, what his thoughts were. He was going to extend olive branches to other countries. He was going to ask questions that were not asked. He was going to deal with them in the way he saw fit. And that's why he was able to meet with the likes of Kim Jong-un and extend an olive branch to Vladimir Putin and not create these fake Cold War phony adversaries that we don't need in 2019. We need peace. And a lot of libertarians and common sense type people understand that. So again, just reviewing all of these facts, it just doesn't make any sense that we're in the situation. They're claiming quid pro quo. There's whistleblowers galore going after him. It was just a matter of time. I mean, if anything, it might serve that Democrats knew deep down in their heart they weren't going to be able to throw him out of office or impeach him, but this was their idea to create all of this spectacle and to have all of this fury towards Donald Trump volcanically erupt in the election year. I mean, maybe this is what they were going for. Maybe this was part of their strategy to get Donald Trump out of office to begin with. And then you look around at the public and you think a lot of people are just exhausted by what's going on mentally. People are like, we don't want to deal with this. There's no sense clicking on TV. They start to tune it out and everything becomes desensitized because they realize this is just foolish. This doesn't make any sense. Why am I even watching this anymore? This is going to go nowhere. I mean, every American is just rolling their eyes, many Democrats as well, or lefties in the United States, knowing this is not going to go anywhere. This is just a political stunt. So there's some of these people on the left who have a big audience on Twitter and social media who are following this so intently and excited and high-fiving and so fired up today's impeachment day, as if this is achieving anything. I mean, is this like a moral victory? Do they feel like good inside that the term impeachment was utilized and it hit Donald Trump? I mean, what is this achieving? Again, nothing. So I just want to take another second to say, well, if an impeachable offense is an assault against the Constitution or offense against the Constitution, every single person who's not a libertarian, who is not voting in the terms of constitutionality, they all should be impeached. The entire Congress should be impeached. All the few hundred people, 100 or so in the Senate and the 300 plus in the House of Representatives, all of them should be impeached. Also should be the Supreme Court. All of the justices on the Supreme Court should be impeached. We're allowing legislation to be passed that's not constitutional. We're allowing Supreme Court verdicts that are not constitutional. And then moreover, the president is engaged in reckless activity, not ending endless wars, that is unconstitutional. There are many things that Donald Trump has done that is unconstitutional, but the stuff that Democrats are starting to chase are indeed constitutional and fine and just conversational in nature, and the public has the right to know what foreign leaders are doing with our money, our taxpayer dollars that shouldn't be going there to begin with, and what the former vice president's son is doing over there, because, of course, Ukraine does not like the idea that Donald Trump was elected. So these are things that are okay to ask. It's very bizarre. I mean, the reason there's an impeachable offense even being talked about is because the Democrats want to cling to everything and find every whistleblower to turn out under the sun to move their agenda. I'm sure there's some bribes involved. I mean, all these people are corrupt for the most part. They're not taking bribes that are illegal per se, but they're taking bribes from other lobbyists and people trying to strong-arm the Constitution and the nation. So yeah, everyone should be ashamed of themselves for how they don't follow the Constitution. That's why we're in the position we are. I mean, what they're trying to get Donald Trump on is not an impeachable offense. They could impeach him on war crimes. They could impeach him on actually doing things that are not in lockstep with the Constitution. Why do they not do that? It's because every single person there is advocating for things that are not constitutional, including the firebrand conservatives on the right, with the exception of probably Rand Paul. But anytime someone funds a massive department or cabinet or agency that's unconstitutional, that is indeed unconstitutional. That's what they're doing. The Supreme Court sees hundreds of cases each year. Probably they're about 100. They don't see many. But to the extent that they do, the ones that are chosen, 99% of that stuff, that how the verdict comes down, is not constitutional at all. If any of these judges had any guts, they'd be repealing a lot of these unconstitutional case decisions and moving along and really keeping the legislative and executive branch in check. So the visceral hatred for Donald Trump is quite hilarious. I mean, it makes people's heads explode. People are so happy today. They're celebrating on this hump day on Wednesday today. I'm recording this for next Friday, but they're just celebrating. They're in such glee because in addition to Trump tweeting, we have Vice, who's the ever liberal outlet who I happen to follow because culturally they are hilarious and they post a lot of funny things. So I like to follow them, but they have this insane slanted bent to the left and they're saying happy impeachment day with exclamation points as if this is accomplishing anything. If this is just helping out our nation. I mean, if we want to be a nation of laws, we should be embarrassed that it got this far and it's just a political stunt. That's all it is. It's a political hit job, the entire thing. I don't feel bad for Donald Trump that he's crowing and moaning because he put himself in these positions. What he should have done is really cleansed his departments and cabinets and federal offices of all these holdovers and had people go in there who are loyal to him and straighten these people out, and then really tried harder to do things that would be, from a legislative perspective, a lot more of a distraction. Like had he actually tried building the wall and accomplished some wall stuff, or had he actually gotten us out of some wars, there would be so many heads exploding on the left that they wouldn't have time to try to file impeachment based on a conversation. It's because he hasn't achieved really anything at all that he set out to do is why the Democrats are really reaching for things that make him furious, that are really nothing burgers. That's why. It's because he hasn't accomplished a lot. If he was really a mover and a shaker and the media hated him even more, which is hard to believe because everyone does hate him in the media for the most part, that would be probably, him not finding himself in the situation he is right now. So I'm going to not go my full 30 minutes here. I don't want to drag this out. I wanted to give you guys a quick little glimpse as to what was going on, lay some of the facts out for you, and just let you guys know that we should keep on rocking and rolling and not worry about these impeachment proceedings because, of course, they're not going to amount to anything, and we're going to have an election in 2020 anyway, and we'll see where the chips fall because I think Donald Trump is going to be the president again, giving some earth-shattering news in the economy because this whole thing is going to blow up in the Democrats' face. It's going to backfire, and I don't think the public's really buying it at all, except for a few people at Vice and a few lefties who have nothing better to do than to criticize Donald Trump and find, really latch on to what the media says about impeaching him because that's what they want to do. They have nothing better to do. They don't have normal lives. They'd rather just see the guy be thrown out of office so we can replace him with someone who'll do the same thing. They just have a D in front of their name instead of an R. They're more of a donkey candidate than that of an elephant. They're just going to do the same exact thing Donald Trump has done because nothing that Trump, Obama, Bush, Clinton, any of these people have done is really that much different. It's really one party. It's the swamp. It's the establishment. It's always increasing the size of government. It's continuously being unconstitutional. It's a continuous assault against our liberties. It's a continuation of the gravity moving us towards the left as a nation and these inevitabilities of socialism and inevitabilities of losing out on free speech and decrying things as hate speech and the assault against the Second Amendment and all of these things. I mean, this is just all these things that are inevitable, and Donald Trump, unfortunately, is the fist in the velvet glove, just continuing the punching of the American public. But while he's trying to do a few good things for the American public, that fist is coming twice as hard due to the fact that people want to impeach him for grounds that are not impeachable and make the country look even worse and continue us devolving into a perpetual state of we hate each other, nothing will ever be accomplished, and government always has to grow. So that being said, I feel a tiny bit bad for Donald Trump, but not really at all. He should focus on accomplishing more things and less tweeting. I feel more bad for the American public and the people who are duped to think this impeachable offense is indeed impeachable while it is not. And I encourage people to do everything they can at a local level to stand up for their civil liberties, for their gun rights, for paying as minimal taxes as they possibly can, and just being an advocate of people who are good stewards with the government dollars and ensure that in time, things will get better when we double down on liberty. We will figure something out as a populace. Maybe not now. I have this cynical take. But as all of this transpires, just make sure you laugh at all of this. Laugh at Donald Trump being furious. Laugh at Vice News. And we will continue to have a great remainder of the holiday season. And I will see you guys following Christmas. Thank you.